Have you ever stopped to wonder why, in an era of unprecedented connectivity, millions of people wake up every morning feeling a deep emptiness in their chest, a sensation that they are fundamentally disconnected from the world around them? Why, despite having more communication tools than any previous generation, so many adults live in silent and desperate isolation? The answer to this question is not found in social media algorithms or the complexities of modern life. It is buried in the deepest layers of our formation as human beings in those first years of life when our capacity for connection was shaped by experiences that many of us cannot even consciously remember. Today, I want to explore with you a truth that our society prefers to ignore. How emotional wounds from childhood not only influence, but literally program our ability to form meaningful bonds in adult life, creating patterns of isolation that we perpetuate without understanding their origins. Imagine a 5-year-old child who learns through repeated experiences that expressing their emotional needs results in rejection, neglect, or punishment. This child is not just going through a difficult time. They are receiving a fundamental education about how the world works, about what it means to be vulnerable, and about the risks of seeking genuine connection. Each ignored tear, each rejected request for attention, each moment when their feelings are minimized or ridiculed is engraving in their developing nervous system a powerful lesson. Connection is dangerous. Vulnerability is weakness, and safety lies in isolation. This is not an abstract theory from psychology. It is a neurobiological reality documented by decades of research on child development and neuroplasticity. For thousands of years, human societies organized themselves around structures that naturally provided children with multiple attachment figures and emotional safety nets. Hunter-gatherer tribes raised their children in communities where each adult had some level of responsibility for the emotional well-being of all children. There was no modern concept of the isolated nuclear family where one or two people are completely responsible for the complex emotional development of a child. When a child faced difficulties with their biological parents, there were grandparents, uncles, aunts, tribal elders, and other adults who could offer alternative models of relationship and emotional support. The system was naturally redundant, providing multiple opportunities for the child to learn about trust, safety, and healthy connection. The agricultural revolution began to fragment these structures, but it was really the Industrial Revolution that created the isolated nuclear family model we know today. For the first time in human history, we began raising children in small and often dysfunctional family units, where the unresolved traumas of parents were transmitted directly to the next generation without the natural support systems that had existed for millennia. Imagine what it means for a child to grow up in a house where the only available relationship models are parents who themselves never learn to regulate their emotions, communicate their needs, or form secure bonds. It is like trying to learn to navigate using only a defective map without access to other sources of guidance. What makes this situation particularly tragic is that emotional wounds from childhood are not like physical wounds that heal with time. They become part of the child's neurological architecture, influencing how the brain processes emotions, interprets social signals, and responds to stress and intimacy. A child who grows up with emotionally unavailable parents does not just learn to deal with rejection, they learn to anticipate rejection, to interpret neutrality as hostility, and to protect themselves from the pain of future disappointments by maintaining emotional distance from other people. These are not conscious choices the child makes. They are automatic adaptations that the brain develops to survive in an emotionally unsafe environment. When this child becomes an adult, they carry within them a hyperactive emotional alarm system that was calibrated by experiences of helplessness and rejection. Approaching another person, even in a positive way, activates this alarm system, creating sensations of anxiety, vulnerability, and danger that are very real to the nervous system, even if they do not correspond to the reality of the current situation. This is why so many adults report feeling lonelier when they are in relationships than when they are alone. Physical and emotional proximity activates the old wounds, creating a state of hypervigilance that makes genuine intimacy almost impossible. What our digital age has done is offer an apparently perfect solution to this dilemma. Social networks, dating apps, and virtual communication forms allow us to maintain an illusion of connection while remaining fundamentally safe behind our emotional barriers. We can have hundreds of online friends. We can exchange constant messages. We can even have intimate virtual relationships, all without ever running the real risk of the genuine vulnerability that old wounds taught us to fear. It is a brilliant solution to the wrong problem. Instead of healing the wounds that prevent us from connecting, we found increasingly sophisticated ways to avoid having to face them. But the human brain evolved over millions of years to thrive through face-to-face connection, through physical contact, emotional synchrony, and the genuine presence of other human beings. No amount of Instagram likes or WhatsApp messages can satisfy this fundamental need. In fact, these superficial forms of connection often intensify our sense of isolation because they constantly show us the contrast between what we are receiving and what our nervous system really needs to feel safe and connected. The irony is that we live in a society that constantly tells us to get over our traumas, to leave the past behind, to choose to be happy. But childhood wounds are not choices we can simply decide to abandon. They are real alterations in how our brain processes emotional and social information. It is like telling someone with a broken leg to simply choose to walk normally. The problem is not in willpower, it is in the need for real healing and restructuring of the neurological patterns that were established during the formative years. Here is a truth that can be both liberating and frightening. Most of us have no idea what our childhood was really like. We tend to remember the dramatic events, the moments of obvious trauma, but it is the hundreds of small daily interactions that most deeply shape our capacity for connection. The way our caregivers reacted when we cried, how they responded to our attempts to seek comfort, how they handled their own emotions in our presence, how they navigated conflicts and stress. These are the experiences that programmed our adult capacity to trust, to be vulnerable, and to form secure bonds. A child who grew up with parents who consistently invalidated their feelings learns that their emotions are not trustworthy or important. This child becomes an adult who has difficulty identifying and communicating their own emotional needs, which makes intimate relationships extremely challenging. A child who grew up walking on eggshells around their parents' unpredictable moods learns that relationships are emotional minefields where one wrong move can result in explosion and abandonment. This child becomes an adult who lives in a state of hypervigilance in relationships, constantly analyzing danger signals and preparing for the inevitable abandonment. What makes this situation even more complex is that these patterns are often unconscious. We do not wake up in the morning thinking, today I will sabotage my relationships because of my childhood wounds. Instead, we simply find ourselves repeating the same destructive patterns, attracting the same types of problematic people, or running from the same situations that could offer us genuine intimacy and connection. Our brain is simply executing the programs that were installed during our first years of life, programs that were designed to protect us in an environment that no longer exists. The digital revolution has intensified this problem in ways we are only beginning to understand. Children who grow up with parents addicted to digital devices are experiencing forms of emotional neglect that are subtle but deeply harmful. When a child tries to communicate with a parent who is constantly distracted by phone notifications, they learn that they are not interesting enough to deserve full attention. When a child sees their parents more emotionally engaged with their screens than with the family, they internalize the message that real relationships are less important and gratifying than virtual connections. We are raising a generation of children who are learning about relationships through parents who themselves are struggling with technology, addiction, digital anxiety, and the inability to be genuinely present. These children are developing an even greater tolerance for emotional isolation because it is all they know. They are learning that relationships are superficial transactions mediated by screens, not profound experiences of connection, vulnerability, and mutual support. But perhaps the most tragic part of all this is how our society misinterprets the symptoms of childhood trauma. When an adult struggles with depression, anxiety, addiction, or dysfunctional relationships, we tend to see these as individual problems that require individual solutions. We prescribe medications, recommend individual therapy, suggest lifestyle changes, as if isolation and dysfunction were personal choices instead of adaptive responses to emotionally unsafe environments during formative years. The truth is that the epidemic of isolation we see in modern society is not a coincidence or an inevitable consequence of technological progress. It is the predictable result of decades of raising children in emotionally impoverished environments, where basic needs for safety, connection, and validation were not consistently met. Every isolated adult we see today was once a child who tried to connect and was somehow wounded in the process. I want to pause here and ask directly, Do you recognize any of these patterns in your own life? Those moments when you feel inexplicably anxious, when someone tries to get emotionally close, the tendency to sabotage relationships when they begin to become genuinely intimate, the feeling that you are fundamentally different or separate from other people, even in the midst of crowds? I know it can be painful to recognize these tendencies in ourselves, because we often carry shame about our inability to connect the way we see others doing. But I want you to know that if you recognize these patterns, you are not alone, and more importantly, you are not broken. Your nervous system is simply operating according to the programming it received during your most vulnerable years. Share in the comments, I recognize in myself the pattern of. Your courage in naming these patterns can help other people understand that they are not alone in their struggles, and that recognizing these patterns is the first step toward real healing. Understanding the origins of our isolation is not about blaming our parents or reliving past traumas. In fact, it is about something much more powerful: recognizing that our current relationship patterns are not personality flaws or personal inadequacies, but intelligent adaptive responses to circumstances that our childhood brain interpreted as threatening. This understanding frees us from shame and opens us to the possibility of genuine healing. What modern neuroscience shows us is that the brain maintains its capacity for change and healing throughout life. The patterns established in childhood are powerful, but they are not permanent. Through repeated experiences of safety, acceptance, and genuine connection, it is possible to literally rewrite the neural programming that keeps us trapped in patterns of isolation. But this process requires much more than willpower or positive thinking. It requires corrective relational experiences that demonstrate to our nervous system that connection can be safe. This is where we find both the tragedy and the hope of our current situation. The tragedy is that many of us will spend our entire lives without ever experiencing the kind of safe and nurturing connection that our brain needs to heal. We will continue repeating the patterns learned in childhood, transmitting our unresolved wounds to our own children, perpetuating cycles of isolation and dysfunction that extend through generations. The hope lies in the growing understanding that this healing is possible and that it is never too late to begin. But healing from attachment trauma does not happen in isolation. By definition, relational wounds require relational experiences to heal. This means finding people, whether they are specialized therapists, support groups, conscious friends, or healing communities, who can offer the kind of safe and consistent presence that our childhood brain needed, but did not receive. It means learning to tolerate vulnerability gradually, in small doses, while building evidence that connection can be safe. One of the most important discoveries from trauma research is that we do not necessarily need to relive or process every painful childhood experience to heal. What our nervous system needs are repeated experiences that contradict the old lessons about danger and rejection. Each time someone truly sees us and accepts us, each time we manage to express a need and receive a compassionate response, each time we experience conflict that is resolved with respect and care, we are creating new neural pathways that can eventually become stronger than the old patterns. But perhaps the most revolutionary aspect of this understanding is how it changes our perspective on personal responsibility and collective healing. If we understand that epidemic isolation in our society is not an individual failure, but the result of systematic child-rearing practices that do not meet children's basic emotional needs, then the solution cannot be merely individual. We need to reimagine how we create communities that support healthy emotional development, how we raise children so that their attachment needs are consistently met, and how we offer healing to the millions of adults who carry unresolved childhood wounds. This requires a fundamental shift in how we think about success and social priorities. Instead of measuring progress only through economic or technological metrics, we need to begin valuing and measuring our collective capacity to create healthy relationships, to support children's emotional development, and to offer healing to those who have been wounded. We need to recognize that a society full of emotionally wounded and isolated adults cannot be truly prosperous, no matter how advanced its technology or how robust its economy. The pandemic offered us a dramatic demonstration of how fundamental human connection is to our health and well-being. During periods of forced social isolation, we saw dramatic increases in depression, anxiety, addiction, and suicide, but for many people who were already living with deep emotional isolation, the pandemic simply made visible a reality that had existed for years or decades. The forced physical isolation revealed how emotionally isolated many of us were already living. Now, as we emerge from this collective experience, we have a unique opportunity to reimagine how we want to live and how we want to relate to each other. We can choose to return to the old patterns of superficial technology-mediated connection, or we can use this experience as a catalyst to create more genuine and nurturing forms of community and relationship. Part of this transformation requires that we recognize and address the systematic ways our current society is hostile to emotional healing. We live in a culture that values productivity over well-being, that sees vulnerability as weakness, that treats symptoms instead of addressing root causes. Our workplaces reward people who suppress their emotional needs in favor of productivity. Our educational systems prioritize academic performance over emotional development. Our media constantly bombards us with images of unrealistic relationships and impossible standards of success. To create a society that genuinely supports healing and connection, we need to question these fundamental priorities. We need to create spaces where it is safe to be vulnerable, where time for healing is valued, where healthy relationships are prioritized over individual achievements. This does not mean abandoning ambition or progress. It means recognizing that true progress includes our ability to form healthy bonds and to support the emotional flourishing of all members of society. Each day that passes, more research confirms what indigenous peoples have always known, that we are fundamentally interconnected beings, that our individual health is inextricably linked to the health of our communities, and that unhealed wounds perpetuate through generations until they are consciously addressed and transformed. The childhood wounds that shape the isolated adult are not just personal problems, they are symptoms of a society that has lost the wisdom of how to create and support emotionally healthy human beings. But here is the liberating truth I want to leave you with. The fact that these wounds were created relationally means they can be healed relationally. The fact that our patterns of isolation were learned means that new patterns of connection can be learned. The fact that our brain was shaped by past experiences means it can be reshaped by new experiences. Neuroplasticity offers us the possibility of rewriting our emotional programming, no matter how many years we have lived with the old patterns. This healing process is neither quick nor easy, but it is profoundly possible. Each person who chooses to face their childhood wounds and do the work of healing not only transforms their own life, they break a cycle that could have continued through generations. Each healthy relationship we manage to form offers evidence to other people that genuine connection is possible. Each act of courageous vulnerability creates space for others to be equally courageous. The epidemic of isolation in our society is not an intractable problem or an inevitable consequence of modernity. It is the predictable result of practices that can be changed, of systems that can be transformed, of patterns that can be interrupted. But this transformation begins with individuals courageous enough to look honestly at their own wounds and committed enough to do the work of healing not just for themselves, but for the future generations who will be affected by their choices. If these reflections have touched on something you have been feeling, but perhaps have not found words to express, know that your journey toward healing and genuine connection is one of the most important works you can do, not just for yourself, but for all those whose lives will be touched by yours. By subscribing to this channel, you will connect with a growing community of people who share your commitment to genuine emotional growth and personal transformation. Each week, we explore together not just the roots of our deepest challenges, but also the practical paths toward healing and flourishing. This is not just a space for understanding our problems. It is a space for finding and implementing real solutions. Subscribe to continue this journey together, because the healing the world needs begins with individuals courageous enough to do their own deep inner work. The wounded child within each isolated adult is still waiting to be seen, understood, and finally healed. It is not too late to offer them what they always needed: safe presence, unconditional acceptance, and the experience that genuine connection is not only possible, but is our fundamental right as human beings. Isolation may have been our survival strategy, but connection is where we find our fullest humanity and our truest potential.
The book is about the history of information. Nexus means connection, and information is connection. People often think about information as something related to truth, but most of the information in the world is not an attempt to tell the truth. It's not necessarily lies. If you think, for instance, about music, music is information, but music never tells the truth and never lies. There is a lot of bad music that people created over the years, but there is no fake music. It's just impossible to create fake music. What does music do? It connects people. It doesn't tell us the truth about something. It can make a lot of people in a club sway together to the sound of the same song. It can make a lot of soldiers march together in lockstep. It can make churchgoers to chant and to swing together. So this is what information does. It connects, and this is why the book is called Nexus, Connection.
So you are a military, you studied the military history of the Middle East. Did you ever expect to now be the foremost expert on all things AI and whether we are doomed as humanity?
I'm not the foremost expert, but I didn't expect to be talking about AI with such an audience. As you said, I was originally a specialist in medieval military history, and but the Middle Ages are coming back in many ways.
Okay. Okay, we're going to get into that. And then feel free to get into that as I ask you this first question. You call artificial intelligence, or alien intelligence as you refer to it throughout your writing, the rise of a new species that could replace Homo sapiens.
Yeah.
Sapiens, your prior book. What does it mean to be human right now?
To be aware that for the first time we have real competition on the planet. That we have been the most intelligent species by far for tens of thousands of years, and this is how we got from being an insignificant ape in a corner of Africa to being the absolute rulers of the planet and of the ecosystem. And now we are creating something that could compete with us in the very near future. The most important thing to know about AI is that it is not a tool like all previous human inventions. It is an agent. An agent in the sense that it can make decisions independently of us. It can invent new ideas. It can learn and change by itself. All previous human inventions, whether a printing press or the atom bomb, they are tools that empower us.
They needed us.
They need us because a printing press cannot write books by itself, and it cannot decide which books to print. An atom bomb cannot invent the next more powerful bomb, and an atom bomb cannot decide what to attack. An AI weapon can decide by itself which target to attack and design the next generation of weapons by itself.
So this is why you argue that AI is potentially, or it sounds like you're saying is, by the way now, but you've written in the past, potentially more momentous in the invention of the telegraph, the printing press, even writing. But the way you talk about it in Nexus is that it is a baby.
Yeah.
Because it learns from us. And therefore, your argument is that we, especially the powerful leaders in this room, have a lot of responsibility because how we act is how AI will be. You cannot expect to lie and cheat and have benevolent AI.
Yeah.
Explain that.
Yeah, there is a big discussion around the world about AI alignment. Okay, we are creating these increasingly super intelligent, very powerful new agents. How do we make sure that these agents remain aligned with human goals and with the benefit of humanity, that they do what is good for us? And so there is a lot of research and a lot of efforts focused on the idea that if we can design these AIs in a certain way, if we can teach them certain principles, if we can code into them certain goals, then we will be safe. But there are two main problems with this approach. First of all, again, the very definition of AI is that it can learn and change by itself. If you have a machine that can act automatically, but only following pre-programmed orders, then, it's a coffee machine. It can do something automatically, produce coffee, but it cannot decide or invent anything by itself. It's not an AI. So when you design an AI, by definition, this thing is going to do all kinds of things which you cannot anticipate. If you can anticipate everything it will do, it is by definition not an AI. So that's one problem. The other even bigger problem, that we can think about AI, like you said, like a baby or a child. And you can educate a child to the best of your ability, and he or she will still surprise you, for better or worse. No matter how much you invest in their education, they are independent agents. They might eventually do something which will surprise you and even horrify you. The other thing is, everybody who has any knowledge of education knows that in the education of children, it matters far less what you tell them.
And what you do.
It matters far more what you do.
Yeah.
If you tell your kids, don't lie, and your kids watch you lying to other people, they will copy your behavior, not your instructions. Now, if we have now these big projects to educate the AIs, not to lie, but the AIs are given access to the world, and they watch how humans behave, and they see some of the most powerful humans on the planet, including their parents, lying, the AI will copy the behavior. People who think that I can run, say, this huge AI corporation, and while I'm lying, I will teach my AIs not to lie, it will not work. It will copy your behavior.
One of your central arguments is that we as society writ large have focused way too much on power. And you also make the argument that some disagree with or will call counterintuitive, that more information is great for democracies because you say all information is not true information, et cetera.
Most information is not the truth.
Right.
There's a huge confusion between information and truth. Yeah. Yes, some information is true, and you get information to get to know the truth, but generally, the truth is a very, very small subset of most of the information in the universe.
So if we are focusing too much on power, and that's a very important distinction, you say this is why we have failed as people largely to answer actually the biggest questions of life. If we can be more productive, we can be richer, we can have stronger militaries. But many of us can't answer the question, as you write, who are we? What should we aspire to? And what is a good life? Essentially, we are accumulating power, not wisdom.
Yeah.
How can we change it?
And that's the big problem of human history, for thousands of years. We are extremely good in acquiring more power. Again, this is how we transform ourselves from an insignificant ape in East Africa into the ruler of the world. We can fly to the moon, we can split the atom. But we don't seem to be significantly happier than we were in the Stone Age. We don't know how to translate power into happiness. Again, you look at the most powerful people on the planet, they don't seem to be the happiest people on the planet. So there is a very...
Do you want to ask them? There are many of them.
I'm not necessarily referring to the people in this room. I want to clarify, I don't think there is a contradiction between power and happiness. I don't think that as you acquire more power, you necessarily become miserable. No. But it can go together, but it doesn't necessarily go together. And as a species, we have not been particularly good in translating power into happiness or even into knowledge and wisdom. Again, we tend to confuse intelligence with knowledge and with truth. But we are the most intelligent species on the planet. We are also the most delusional species on the planet.
And destructive, you argue.
And self-destructive, yeah. The kind of things that people believe, no other animal on the planet will believe such nonsense.
Like?
Except, if I look at my own country, like, you would not find any animal that believes that if you go and kill other members of your species, you will be rewarded after death by entering paradise. No chimpanzee will believe that. No horse would believe that. No wolf will believe that. Millions of people believe that, and they believe it so strongly that they actually go and kill people in the expectation that as a result, they will be rewarded in paradise with whatever.
We took a really interesting poll this morning asking the leaders in this room how consequential they think AI has been so far in their business. And actually only the businesses they lead, and only a small portion said significantly. Most it was moderately or not at all.
Yeah.
Can you speak to them as if we were sitting here 36 months from now? Is there any world in which AI doesn't have a significant impact on their business?
It depends on their business, but in most fields, again, the question is one of time scale. You know, I've been talking to a lot of the people who lead the AI revolution, and many of them say, you know, we are already in the middle of the AI revolution, we still haven't seen anything really major. And that's just the difference between how historians view time and how CEOs and entrepreneurs view time. For an entrepreneur, 2 years is a long time. For historians, it's nothing. It's like, imagine that we are now sitting in London and the year is 1835. The first railway has been opened between Manchester and Liverpool 5 years ago. And we have now this conference in London in 1835, and people saying, you know, all this talk about railways changing the world, the Industrial Revolution, this is nonsense. We have had railways for ages, 5 years. And look, okay, so there is some changes that they now have people traveling with the trains, or they move around coal more easily. But nothing major happened. Because there is a time lag between the invention of a technology and the moment when you see the actual social and political consequences.
Yeah.
So we now know that the Industrial Revolution and trains, they completely transformed everything. Geopolitics, the way people fight wars, the economy, family structure, but it just took more than 5 years. The same is likely to happen with AI. In all fields, from the obvious to the less obvious, like I think that one of the first fields we'll see major changes is finance.
Okay.
That AI is going very quickly to take over the financial system.
We have some bankers in the room, so tell us more.
Because finance is the ideal playing ground for AI. It's purely an informational realm. If you want to have an AI self-driving vehicle on the road, which has been promised again and again, and we are still not there, the problem...
Waymo.
Yeah, but you go around London, you don't see these tens of thousands of self-driving vehicles yet. I just passed my first driving lesson
Congratulations.
here in the UK, and you still need to learn how to drive.
Okay.
So
but
the problem is that for driving, you need to deal with the messy physical world of pedestrians and holes in the roads and whatever. But in finance, it's only information in, information out. It's much easier for an AI to master that. And what happens to finance once AIs, for instance, start inventing new financial devices that the human brain is simply incapable of dealing with because it's mathematically too complex? We are going to see AI changing even things like religion.
How?
At least religions which are based on texts, like Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, they give ultimate authority to the text, not to any human being. Now, until today, humans were nevertheless the main authority in these religions because the texts could not speak. The Bible could not interpret itself. The Bible could not answer your questions, so you needed a human being as an intermediary. What happens when you have an AI text that can speak for itself? No Jewish rabbi can know all the texts of Judaism because there are too many of them. For the first time in history, there is something on the planet that is able to remember every single word in every writing of every rabbi in the last 2,000 years and talk back to you and explain and defend its views. So I have friends who are now working on building religious AIs that are meant to either augment or replace human religious leaders, especially in text-based religions. If the religion is not based on texts, it doesn't give authority to a text, it's a different story.
Okay, but I go, and we're going to questions next. I'm going to come first to Mattia Moore if you want to raise your hand, and we'll get you a microphone. But I go and talk to my pastor at our church when I am going through a difficult time. I am never going to talk to ChatGPT like that.
But it's an individual choice.
So you think some will?
I know that already millions of people do it. I mean, I know people who go for now AIs to get psychological counseling.
Yes.
That AI is their best friend, like teenagers. Something happened in school, they consult with, they tell the AI what happened and ask for advice about relationships.
So let me get back to, and then the question is next, let me get back to what you said, though, about replacing jobs. This is really important, and you write and talk a lot about what you're worried about, what it becomes a useless class. That's what you've talked about. And it was 5 or 6 years ago, I interviewed Google CEO Sundar Pichai in Oklahoma in one of their data centers. We need many, many more of them now to power AI. And I remember asking him about AI. It was, people were talking about it a lot then, and he essentially told me, and I'm paraphrasing here, that if AI proves to be, quote, in his words, very disruptive to too many American jobs, he essentially said they would be open to slowing it down. Okay. I'm talking about this, not just Google, just writ large, these companies right now. If we are headed for what you're talking about, a potential useless class, many, interestingly, white-collar jobs, so it's getting a little bit more attention, perhaps, than when it replaced blue-collar jobs, which is a whole issue in and of itself. What do we do to make sure we as a society not only survive, but thrive?
I want to emphasize that AI has enormous positive potential as well as dangerous potential. And I don't believe in historical or in technological determinism. You can use the same technology to create completely different kinds of societies. We saw it in the 20th century that you used exactly the same technology to build communist totalitarian regimes and liberal democracies.
That's right.
It's the same with AI. We have a lot of choices about what to do with it, if, again, provided we remember that for the first time we are dealing with agents and not tools. So it makes it much more complicated. But we do have still, most of the agency is in our hands. And the question of how we develop the technology, and even more importantly, how we deploy it, we can make a lot of choices there.
We have agency in how we move forward. We don't have a choice that it has come. Yeah. We have power in how we use it and go through it.
Absolutely. The main problem is that now the companies and countries that lead the AI revolution has been locked into an arms race situation. So even if they know that it would be better to slow down, to invest more in safety, to be careful about this or that potential development, they are constantly afraid that if we slow down and they don't slow down, they will take over the world.
So let's get to some questions here. Mattia Moore with Emotion Network. Hi, yes, right here.
Hi, so congratulations, because I mean your books are really eye-opening, and so you gave already a lot of answers through your books and also today. We as a company, we have a conference called Tech Emotion because we strongly believe in the power of mixing technology and innovation with emotion, creativity, and culture. But and in what you're saying, this is a lot of a mix of this. So what I think it's really interesting what you are saying about also the effect on religion, the effect on the soul of the people, and this is also related to what she was saying about the purpose of the life of the people that is going to be destroyed or changed a lot by AI, by all these innovations. So how do you think it's possible to get a future where people is going to be more satisfied and more happy and also find more purpose in what they do with the difficulties that this world is changing? So I know this is a big question, but I think that is the most important thing in our life, much more than business, but more than anything else.
Yeah, so it's a very big subject. The most important thing, I only have time to talk about one thing, so the most important thing is that we need to solve our own human problems instead of relying on the AI to do it for us. And the key problem is the problem of trust and cooperation.
At the present moment, trust is collapsing all over the world, both between countries and within societies. And the hope that, okay, humans can no longer trust each other, so the international system and the trade system and everything is collapsing, but the AI will save us, will solve. No, it will not. In a world in which humans compete with each other ferociously and cannot trust each other, the AI produced by such a world will be a ferocious, competitive, untrustworthy AI. It's not possible for humans, as they engaged in this ferocious competition, to create benevolent, trustworthy AI. It will just not happen. So if you think about it, it's just a question of priority. We have now this big human trust problem, and we have the issue, how do we develop AI? Too many people think, okay, let's first solve the how do we develop AI problem, and then this will solve the human trust problem. It will not work. We need to get our priorities the other way. First solve the human trust problem, then together we can create benevolent AI. Of course, this is not what is happening right now in the world.
Do we have one more? Yes, right here.
Thanks very much, Yuval. Quick question from me. So, in human history, there's been organizing principles, and you write about that so much in your books. And there's been, in some senses, at least geographically, monolithic organizing principles, like religion and the church was one of those. But when we talk about AI, we're not talking about something that is monolithic, right? There is no the AI. This is really effectively going to be multiple plethoras of AIs manifesting themselves.
Absolutely.
And in that context, when you describe AI replacing religion in some sense, I think the real question for me is, when you have no single organizing principle, there is no the AI that gets developed with any kind of intent, whether that intent is benevolent or otherwise, and there's all of these competing AIs that are effectively evolving fast, what does that world look like?
That's a very, very important point. I mean, the AI will not be one big AI. We are talking about potentially millions or billions of new AI agents with different characteristics, again, produced by different companies, different countries, everywhere. In the military, in the financial system, in the religious system. So you'll have a lot of religious AIs competing with each other. Which AI will be the authoritative AI rabbi for which currents of Judaism? And the same in Islam, and the same in Hinduism, and in Buddhism, and so forth. So you will have competition there. And in the financial system. And we just have no idea what the outcome will be. We have thousands of years of experience with human societies. What happens when millions of humans compete for economic power, for religious authority? It's very complex, but we at least have some experience in how these things develop. We have zero experience in what happens in AI societies when millions of AIs compete with each other. We just don't know. Now, this is not something you can simulate in the AI labs. If OpenAI, for instance, wants to check the safety or the potential outcome of its latest AI model, it cannot simulate history in a laboratory. It can check for all kinds of failures in the system, but it cannot tell in advance what happens when you have millions of copies of these AIs in the big world outside, developing in unanticipated ways, interacting with each other and with billions of human beings. So it's in a way, it's the biggest social experiment in human history. We are all part of it, and nobody has any idea how it will develop. One analogy to keep in mind, we now have this immigration crisis in the US, in Europe, elsewhere. Lots of people worried about immigrants. Why are people worried about immigrants? There are three main things that come to people's mind. They will take our jobs. They come with different cultural ideas. They will change our culture. they may have political agendas. They might try to take over the country politically. These are the three main things that people keep coming back to. Now, you can think about the AI revolution as simply a wave of immigration of millions and billions of AI immigrants that will take people's jobs, that have very different cultural ideas, and that might try to gain some kind of political power. And these AI immigrants, these digital immigrants, they don't need visas, they don't cross the sea in some rickety boat in the middle of the night, they come at the speed of light. And I look, for instance, at far-right parties in Europe, and they talk so much about the human immigrants, sometimes with justification, sometimes without justification. They don't talk almost at all about the wave of digital immigrants that is coming into Europe. And I think they should be much, if they care about the sovereignty of their country, if they care about the economic and cultural future of their country, they should be far more worried about the digital immigrants than about the human immigrants.
Yuval, this has been remarkable. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very, very much. I'll see you after.
If you think about all the debate about abortion, without going into the debate itself, the people who think, rightly or wrongly, but they think that abortion is murder, they have a very strong incentive to build a surveillance system for American women, to stop murder.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can build this surveillance system that can identify, yesterday you're pregnant, today you are not, what happened in between? So it's not just a problem, for Iran or for the Palestinians or the Chinese. This can come to the US as well.
And to prevent them from crossing state lines, things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, okay, you went from, Texas to California, you were pregnant, you came back, you're not pregnant. What happened in California?